Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. Yeah. I hope my team they won. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is out on assignment, so it'll be none other than Charles and I bringing you the news. Welcome to episode 375 Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast. The show that's covering the sporting HBCU dash for all things HBCU sports. For institutions large and small, from the NEIA to the NCAA, we share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs and the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We're filming from our home studios and sending a signal live to KCH 1230 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer, multi-Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper, in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. Today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. Unfortunately, you all, I'm sure, have heard the news. We've actually, at this time, have lost another icon of the HBCUs. But first, I would be remiss. We had, as this life thing circles around, I had a chance Thursday evening with Charles and Mike. We hadn't got outside to kind of celebrate each other and the work we've done. We got a chance to watch Texas Southern University basketball and, more importantly, just enjoy each other's brotherhood and camaraderie, and just check on each other as you would. And then it wasn't much later when we find out, a day later, if you would, that we lost a colleague of ours from Black College Sports Network. Obviously, FAMU alumni have lost a great ambassador. Those that have HBCU sports and shows of the nature have lost Kofi Hemmingway. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge him, his family, and what he brought to the table. Vaughn Wilson, another colleague of ours, obviously directly associated with FAMU and a friend of Kofi's, did a wonderful tribute article on HBCUGameDay.com in terms of Kofi Hemmingway. Also, you had the fact that Brian and AD from Sports Rap acknowledged him. Others along the way have did great shows and acknowledge him, but we'd be remiss if we didn't take this time to acknowledge Kofi Hemmingway. You see, for those that have the means to do it, to provide some type of offering, support, prayers, financially you can contribute. This is for the family of our late brother Kofi Hemmingway. Please contribute to his wife. And you see the Cash App, A.K. Hemmingway, that's Hemming, Way, W-A-Y, for those that are listening, but cannot see the video. For others, can go there and do that. So I wanted to pause and give that moment. Before I do that, Charles, did you want to add anything in regards to honoring the late Kofi Hemmingway, a partner of ours on Black College Sports Network?
No, I think you summed it up well, Dr. Bill. Tremendous ambassador for Florida A&M athletics. One thing you knew about Kofi is he was one of the biggest advocates for Florida A&M. So to lose a voice like that, it would definitely be felt undoubtedly within this HBCU stratosphere, or the HBCU diaspora, as you put it. But just a tremendous voice for Black college athletics that will be truly best. And I thought, like you mentioned, Vaughn Wilson did a tremendous job of the piece that he did in regards to Kofi. And, it is a real tragedy in terms of losing someone who's part of this brotherhood that is part of Black College Sports Network. So definitely condolences to his family.
Right. We have this little page that we do where we messenger and type in there, and Kofi was always the one when we got into the weeds or whatever, he find a way to lighten up the moment. Obviously, it was part of what he saw when so many others were getting into things, whatever, he'd find a way to lighten the moment. Obviously, a very prayerful brother. And I remember some of the great calls that I would get from him, and he would be talking, and obviously a big supporter of the band Railers. And we had a project that we were working on, and somehow have to find a way to honor him and see about moving that project forward in his name in some kind of manner. Brilliant man in a lot of ways in terms of how he thought about it, and certainly put his passion on his sleeve. Before we do the moment to honor Kofi, also, you've heard by now, SWAC mourns the passing of Grambling State University legend Willis Reed. You go to SWAC.org in terms of the memoriam. SWAC mourns the passing of Willis Reed, former Grambling State basketball star, Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame, College Basketball Hall of Fame inductee. Led his team to a NIA national championship. When we talk about the championship, it lets you know about the time in the 1960s. He got that done. Member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity incorporated. And so obviously some of people remember the most about him in a lot of ways being out of that major market New York Knicks in terms of how he was able to help them and push them to a championship, even being injured. So with that being said, let's take a moment of silence for all those in honor, if you would, those that went on to glory. With that being said, any memories that you want to share in regards to Willis Reed? I know you are old man, young man, whatever, so I don't know how you want to share memories there as you have that smile come to your face.
It's really funny. My dad was a huge Willis Reed fan, and it just sticks out to me. I think you had a lot of black men, especially around that time period within the 60s and early 70s, who were Knicks fans because of Willis Reed and Earl to Pearl Monroe. And this team was full of swagger even back then. But I just remember my dad, saying, we were talking about baseball, talking about Derek Jeter being the captain, and he said, "There's only one captain I acknowledge, and that's Willis Reed, captain of the New York Knicks." So that memory just came flooding back to
old
me.
school brothers, boy.
Yeah.
I tell you, you get something out there and you trying to do your little path, and you're like, no, y'all don't understand. Y'all don't understand the way we call the word. It was like different.
Iconic moment, him limping out there to playing that game in the NBA championship. That was just one of the most iconic NBA moments ever.
Yeah, another tough move, not obviously as serious as those, but as the cycle changes, Grambling State is searching for a new women's basketball coach. Coach Freddie Murray has been relieved of his duties effective immediately. He thanked a lot of folks and then moving forward. Always a good guy when I had questions and conversations, always on top of it. Had some great seasons there, had that magical run. Couldn't quite get it there as he continued to push that program. But something that you see with Grambling men's and women's about trying to get over that final hurdle. But it will be interesting to see what Grambling does on the women's side. Everybody is chasing Jackson State in regard to what it means to the excellence that you would have in basketball. Obviously, Southern, to their credit, got it done in a crucial semifinals game, and they were able to win the championship game to close it out. But talking about body of work, that's a lot of it there in regards to what that looks like. But let's transition. We'll take our first break, come back on the other side. We'll do our final women's major division top 10 basketball ranking. I said top 10, but actually top 5, as you all know by now. We'll lay that at the table, lay that to rest. As it's time to get into baseball and softball, boy, it was some great softball games this weekend in terms of crucial matches. I really followed baseball. This is the first weekend where you got baseball conference matchups as we close on Thursday, and told you about some of those top 5 matches. All teams in the SWAC this weekend had at least one ranked team involved. 2 of them had top 5 matches. And it'll be interesting to maybe discuss near the end of the show how all those things fell out, but wanted to kind of do that as a tease as we get into baseball. I was able to watch softball, Prairie View and Texas Southern. They had 2 games, night games they did, got the score of the first game, but came in late in the second matchups. And, man, you talking about rivalry games. It lived up to it. Every time it looked like Texas Southern was going to close up or Prairie View said it was going to close up, obviously it was a home game for Texas Southern, so they go to the bottom and they would match them stroke for stroke in terms of tying it, sending it to extra inning, 2 extra innings, if you would, before Prairie View was able to get it done and actually win both games of the day. But I was like, wow, this is what it is. And then I got a message from Jose, one of my friends out there, Bethune-Cookman. Roy, don't take this too bad, where he talked about softball getting it done against FAMU. So it's always something in terms of these rivalry matchups. You never know. Stick back on the other side. We'll be right back after this break. We'll give you a top 5 final basketball poll ranking for the women, and we'll do the same later in the show for the men. Stick with us as we shout out our lab listeners. Appreciate you for joining us today.
Nope.
Come on, him.
Ooh, I like him.
Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less.
He's an 8.
He's a 9.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
Now, you can't live in Texas and not have a good red meat blend. Texas Cowboy Dust is designed for steak and other red meats. It's out to be my most popular spice blend, made with onions, peppers, ground mushrooms, pink salt, and other spices. Texas Cowboy Dust also goes great with chicken, pork, vegetables, and adds a restaurant-quality sheen to gravies and sauces.
It's like a loop machine. Going around town, people trying to get down.
Vanilla smoked sea salt seasoning is for seafood. The tarragon and fennel bring out the natural sweetness in seafood. I also use it in rice dishes, on yams, asparagus, blueberry pancakes, and believe it or not, chocolate chip cookies. Vanilla smoked sea salt adds a salty and savory component to sweet dishes that create a symphony for the tongue.
When you're looking for the latest information on Southern University sports, the Southwestern Athletic Conference, and HBCU athletics, there's only one place to go. Tune in to the Carlos Brown Show, exclusively on the Black College Sports Network.
The Cuvée Group is a Florida-based marketing and training consulting firm. We help businesses communicate to their target audience and engage them in conversation. We also help to expand their audiences, which will ultimately result in growth for those organizations. In addition to being a certified constant contact specialist, my colleagues and I are also certified in John Maxwell Leadership Principles. We use these proven principles to conduct workshops, training, and private coaching sessions for individuals and companies looking to take things to the next level. Contact us to schedule a free consultation. Issues today, don't delay, call Cuvée.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna law, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach.
This is Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Mike is out on assignment, so none other than Charles will get to see this final poll ranking, see what he thinks, if he has any problems with the ranking, and who ultimately wins Dr. Cavil's 2023 HBCU Major Division Women's Championship for 2023. Let's get into those teams, as there were any teams dropping out this week. Obviously, most of the actions was done this past weekend. We do still have those teams receiving votes. Not a lot of changes here. You have Morgan State Bears sit at 17-12 with their record 10-4 with 39 points. Behind them is Alabama State Hornets 16-15, 11-6 with 32 points. And as we descend down those receiving votes, Morgan State Bears 17-12, 10-4 as they went in the conference race in the MEAC with 32 points there, tied with Alabama State. Prairie View A&M Panthers 15, 12-6. Final ledger there with 22 points, and Alabama A&M Bulldogs are 14-15, 12-6 with 18 points. Let me pause here for a minute in terms of those receiving votes. Obviously, don't know quite the top 5 points there, Charles, but anything that you make of those teams that were outside of the top 5, essentially, if we did a top 10, that's where you would have them at. In the rankings, a team that you see so far that you're concerned with, that you say, no, they really should have finished in the top 5.
I saw Morgan State receiving votes, and I was a little curious. They would definitely, they seem 5A-ish to me. But let's see what we got for 5-1.
Say 5A-ish. I like it. Should be in the 5. Yeah. So let's jump back into it, and let's give it those top 5 rankings. We'll start it here at number 5. Staying at number 5 is Howard Bison, 16-14, 10-4. Great season overall. They threatened for a championship as you get into the tournament, but just fell short as they seemed to have all the answers in that game until late. But it wasn't to be, as Norfolk State ultimately cut down the nets in the tournament championship game. Bringing us to number 4. At number 4, you have the Southern Jaguars, 18-5, 12-6, 58-4. They were part of that 5-way tie for second place in the conference. But boy, do you talk about getting hot at the right time and being able to get it done. 3 straight 3-point points late in the semifinals game against the rival Jackson State, vaults them ultimately with the last-second shot that people will reverberate for many years as those that talk about the history of the SWAC, the Southern Jaguars, and it'll be interesting because as people's memories fade, you see how I put that out there, Charles. Yeah. A lot of people talk about it as the championship game, but it was not the championship game. It was actually the semifinal.
The semifinal, yeah.
Right, and they go on and beat Pine Bluff in the championship game to make all right for Southern Jaguars with the world. 58 points. They remain in 4th place to get it done. Bringing us to number 3. This is the first time we have a program outside of the SWAC and MEAC. Jumps in here, North Carolina A&T State Aggies, 18-12, 12-6, 62 points. Remaining 3, had a really strong season. I think many people liked the way they started. Certainly, as they started conference race and buzzed through it. There might be some folks that kind of argue by the way they close out the season. And maybe that's where you get it with Morgan State and see them too high. But it'll be interesting to get your thoughts on that. But in the final poll ranking, North Carolina A&T sits at number 3. Bringing us to number 2. Number 2 on the list gets us to the SWAC again. Jackson State Tigers 21-10, 17-1. 2 first-place votes, 72 points. Remain at number 2. It's going to be interesting because I think there are people out there that would argue Jackson State probably was the best team out there in some people's opinion. They see them as number 1. But because number 1, Norfolk State, went on the run late in the season, gets the number 1 ranking. Jackson State falls to number 2. So number 1 is none other than Norfolk State Spartans, sitting at 26-7, 11-3. Record-wise, you shouldn't have a problem with them at number 1. 7 first-place votes, 78 points. What really made them special, they were able to do the daily double, as I like to call it. They get the regular season championship, and they come back and are able to navigate the sprint, as I like to call it. You got the mile relay, which is the season, and you have the tournament, which is the sprint. They do the daily double. They get gold in both of them. They finish out with a gaudy record of 26 wins, 7 losses, 11-3, 6 first-place votes, 78 points. Remain at number 1. They ultimately are your 2020-23 HBCU division women's championship, held their own against South Carolina State. That it doesn't look like anybody could stop. Obviously, things went off the rail in the second half, but defensively, Coach made a statement about Norfolk State saying they weren't in a 16 that has literally gone viral. And the fact that Coach come back the following week in the game and puts on a Cheney, jersey of the preeminent women's program that went to the first women's championship game. Did not quite get it done there, but Coach Vivian Stringer, the head coach there, really got it done. So a lot of accolades appropriately going on in terms of the time and homage of them. But Norfolk State gets it done, not to be outdone. Spartans earned Dr. Bill's 2023 HBCU Major Division Women's Championship. Charles, what do you say about the top five in the final team?
Norfolk State
down the next.
Norfolk State a deserving number one, final number one. Here's the question I have, $1 million question. In a one-bid league, Dr. Cavil, as a fan, who do we remember more? Do we remember the regular season champion or do we remember the tournament champion? So if I'm a Southern fan, I'm taking a look at where I am behind North Carolina A&T. We both have 18 wins. We both have the same identical conference record. Why am I under North Carolina A&T when I'm the SWAC champion?
I think it's where Southern climbed to. I think these are one of the things that are week to week. And Southern was outside of the poll, got things rolling late, obviously won the 3 straight games in the tournament that vaulted them to 18 and 15 wins. So I don't think it's so much of just the conference record. There is some strength of schedule in there, but I don't think it plays that much in this. And regardless of what that looks like, I just think it was a lot for Southern to climb. Remember, previous to last week, when after winning the tournament, they were not ranked in the top 5. So it's interesting to see how far they would climb in terms of that matchup. Jackson State only had the 1 loss in conference play. Right. It was to Prairie View, so Jaguars didn't make that kind of statement in regard. And so I think that's part of it, but I think that's a fair question in terms of where you rank them. But I would say in terms of the voters and the computer ranking, that's why you don't necessarily see Southern Jaguars over North Carolina A&T. It's great to see them match up head to head.
Definitely. I mean, and do most fans, do we remember the regular season champion, or do we really, does that tournament champion stick out in our head?
I think the general fan that follows basketball, they tend to remember the regular season champion. I think the team that their fans that wins the tournament championship, they remember the tournament championship. But if you just ask the SWAC fan who was the champion of the 2020 season, which means that's a fan that pretty much watched week to week or, and was in it. So that kind of stains on them over that period of time because they watch it like that. So they tend to be able to remember a little more saying, oh, yeah, the regular season team, as the tournament, as I said, is a sprint. And so unless you, like the fan, are focused on that, I don't think that sticks with you as much as the regular season. True. That's a great question, one that it'd be fun to get out there and kind of research and maybe ask some data, what they do, or maybe even test people who won the 2022 championship, see which one do they come up with, particularly when it's a year when you have somebody that split that didn't win the regular season and the tournament championship. Good stuff, Charles. I see where you're going there. Good stuff. I like that. With that being said, final kudos to Norfolk State Spartans, the women. Get it done of Troy up there in Norfolk, Virginia, part of the MEAC. They cut down the nets and get it done as they win Dr. Cavill's 2023 HBCU Major Division Women's Basketball Championship. Let's take this break. We'll come back on the other side and give you some more updates, get into the major division for the men, see what Charles thinks there. We'll come back around and give you some more baseball updates. So we'll give you our second break. Still with us, we'll be right back on the other side.
Since 2002, Empowerment Resources, Inc., a nonprofit organization, has empowered more than 1,500 youth and adults in Duval and surrounding counties. Through its programs, Journey into Womanhood, Girls Mentoring, Life Skills for Teens, and parenting education coaching. To get involved with programs, volunteer, or donate, visit www.empowermentresourcesinc.org. Follow us on social media, facebook.com/empowerment.resources and instagram.com/empowermentjax.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids' apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Are you hungry for authentic Caribbean food like jerk chicken, oxtail, red snapper, shrimp, tofu, and rasta pasta? Well, find your way over to Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta.
Them belly full, but we hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, open daily from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. And on Friday and Saturday, we're open till 4 a.m. Come to Mango's and put some spice in your life.
Oh, we've got a good thing going.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta. For more info or directions, call 404-698-3992 or log on to mangoscaribbeanrestaurant.com. For instant coupons, text MANGOS to 313131.
Tell your mama hungry, papa hungry, brother hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, authentic Caribbean cuisines.
Open up the door, tell your mama hungry.
From novice to aficionado, find yourself here. High quality cigars plus personal customer service. Slow Burn is Waco's only mobile cigar lounge, featuring a meticulous, curated collection of premium cigars. Visit our website, www.slowburnwaco.com. That's www.slowburnwaco.com.
Compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna love, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Bill with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Let's get into the major top 5 programs this week and crown our champion for 2023 and see who got it done between the conferences. And although Tennessee State dropped that last week, they were actually not ranked this weekend, so they stay out of the top 10. But you see those teams receiving your votes there. Yeah, Texas Southern could not edge in there. I was seeing it maybe FDU. Obviously, if they went on that magical run that you saw FDU and they defeat a number 1 team, I wonder if they're able to jump in the top 5.
Yeah.
That would be 2 more wins for the Ledger. But other than that, they stay out of the top 5. Texas Southern Tigers are 14-21, 7-11 with 56 points. Tennessee State Tigers, though, finished outside of the top 5 at 18-14, 10-8, 43 points. Maryland Eastern Shore Hawks 18-13, 19-5. The voters saw it a little different than you saw on the women's side, where A&T had a late season swan, but Tennessee State had a late season win, but then really fell hard in their last game, as well as the first game of the tournament. So interesting to see how that juxtaposition is a little different there. And I wonder how much is that based on what teams did above them. So let's get in the top 5. Slight change there in regards to some of the teams' rankings. So at number 5, you have Alcorn State Braves, 18-14, 15-3. They do fall 1 spot this week, 66-4. Tough loss to get into the NIT. Make a good run early in that game, but fall out early. So at number 4, you have North Carolina Central Eagles. Get into the 4th spot as they move up 1 slight spot, 18-12, 12-4. Interesting to see how they finished the season compared to Alcorn. Alcorn had the regular season co-championship. North Carolina Central was a game out. But fascinating to see what was the MEAC maybe in terms of their top 8 teams a little stronger than the SWAC in regards to maybe what the voters were thinking about. And anyway, at 76 points, they do move up a spot at the end of the season. At number 3, you have none other than Norfolk State Spartans 22-11, 11-3, 88 points. Finished at number 3. Great season, but did not have postseason play. We talked about that quite a bit last week. It'll be interesting to see how things move over. They have a lot of folks leaving that program, including everything player of the year for 3 straight years, Joe Bryant Jr. It'll be interesting to see who is able to help support him in that move. Also bringing us to number 2 is none other than Grambling State Tigers, 24-8, 15 first place votes, 100 points. They remain at number 2. Tigers have a great season, shared the regular season championship, went on a tournament run and faced Texas Southern for a championship to see if they could get that final hurdle. This is a program, is the only program in the SWAC that has not won a SWAC championship, if you would. Obviously, excluding the new members, FAMU and Bethune-Cookman, as they transition into the program, even though the FAMU has won the championship in the MEAC as well as Bethune-Cookman in regards to regular seasons over there. FAMU in terms of tournament as well. Grambling has not won the tournament, so even though you had the history of Willis Reed and people focus so much on the NCAA, I hate when they say that because it almost ignores the fact how good this program was that they won a national championship. Yes, it was in the NAIA, but that's how history would have it. And when you mark it in the brand of today, when you think about the NCAA in the tournament, they have not gone to the NCAA division tournament. Bring us to number 1. Howard had a magical season, 22-13, 11-3, 9 first place votes, 100, remain at number 1. They actually increased the first place. They took 1 vote away from Grambling as of last week. Similar to the women of Norfolk State Spartans, they do the daily double. They win a regular season, very narrow, but they get it done in terms of the tournament. It looks like they were out of it. It'll be fascinating to see because these will be one of the things, particularly those folks that are history buffs and carry this a long time. They'll remember the out-of-bound play. Or will it be Howard fans that will remember the foul and the free throws to the championship in regards to what that looks like? But that is just how close this thing is when you talk about, magical cities. We play this back and Norfolk wins. Yeah. What does that do? And who wins the mythical championship then when you talk about Norfolk winning for the 3rd time? Well, how does that change everything up? And does Howard still win a national championship, maybe just with less votes? But as history would have it, the national champion is none other than Howard in terms of the men's major division 2023. Charles, enough of me talking. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are Howard is very deserving of that number 1 ranking. And I tell you what, for a half, Dr. Cavil, I saw a basketball team that didn't shrink from the moment in that NCAA tournament, and I thought they had the makings of something that could have been special because I thought they matched up and then they were knocking down that 3 ball. That was the big thing. But when I take a look at your poll, the $1 million question that comes to mind for me, especially in light of Dr. McClellan saying the conference like the SWAC has a long way to go. How do you become that Fairleigh Dickinson? How do you become that St. Peter's in terms of basically not getting your head beat in at the beginning of the season to where you can get to a tournament and compete? That was the big thing that really, jumped out with me, especially taking a look at Howard. Because I said, wow, this is a team that could give somebody some issues and could have a little magical run here, especially in that first round. But it just made me think about with Fairleigh Dickinson, they didn't have a player that was bigger than 6'7", but they literally, they matched up so very well in those first couple of games there. So I was just curious, when you take a look back at our HBCU teams, how do we avoid the 0-11 starts? How do we avoid the 2-10 starts? What is the magic formula to get us to that, point where we get to the, that first round game and compete?
There's been so much conjecture, so much dialogue. I'm glad that you put that on the table so we can spend a little time talking about that, because I think that's important for us to look at it. And I believe there's multiple questions buried in a lot of the thoughts that you had there, in particular the last part of the question there. I think when you talk about those teams that have perennial play, a Power 5 type of conference, and I'm saying playing anywhere between 5 to 7 Power 5 schools. And I want people to, when we talk about Power 5 in basketball, that's extended a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, when we talk about Power 5 in football, what the NCAA talks about, the autonomous 5, those are the Power 5 conferences such as the SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, and Pac-12, right? In regards to those schools. But when you start to talk about those additional conferences, you're also looking at the Big East. You need to add that in there. And then in some cases, you're talking about the American. Sometimes it might be the Atlantic 10, Big West. Some of those teams float, and they're 2-member conferences. But I think the first thing is you have to, one, not schedule as many games away from campus. I don't care who you're playing. When you're playing road games, even mid-majors, or what some people refer to as low majors, depending on where you're talking about quadrant, what articles you read. But even if you play those conferences, it becomes extremely tough to go on the road and win a basketball game.
Yeah.
Let me make it simple for you. What do we talk about during the regular season in the SWAC? These are teams that are similar in terms of experience, similar at least in budget in most cases. But even in SWAC, when you go on the road game, or the MEAC for that matter, what people generally speak, especially when you used to play the 2 back-to-back, is you what? You split on the road.
Split on the road, yeah.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Because
it's hard to win on the road. I don't care who it is.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is first, play more home games. Play more home games. Obviously, remove some of the Power 5 scheduling, right? And play programs more of your ilk. That's one of the things I appreciate, the fact that we're seeing a little more of these classic basketball, and obviously in baseball too, is a similar framework where you play of equal stature team, which means in some ways you're going to get win or loss. So somebody's going to benefit from it. Obviously somebody won't, but they're more competitive. It'll help you in terms of branding and marketing your franchise, your program, I should say. But the other thing I wanted to get into is the next part of your question, where you alluded to, how do we become more competitive in the tournament? And some people are out there even asking, how does the SWAC basketball become a one-bid league? I think the commissioner did a great job in terms of explaining the politics and the metrics, even more so behind that. But I'm like, I don't think we understand that there are few leagues that are getting more than one bid. I don't think people realize how many teams actually go to the tournament above 64. There are 32 automatic bids. Of the 32 automatic bids, I want people to realize this. There are 23 conferences of the 32, right? Right? Mm-hmm. Less than 10, that means get multiple bids. 23 of 32 get one bid. So to get even the 2 bids, you're talking about climbing over 23 teams.
Sure.
To do what they're doing. The first thing is the tournament is not set up for the mid-majors or low-major programs to get more than one bid. It's not mathematically set up. And the first issue you have is financing your program. And I'm not talking about just people getting more or getting the commissioner to do better marketing so they get some more money. or getting the ADs. I'm talking about significant revenue that you see from these proverbial Power 5, Power 7 basketball programs, where they putting millions of dollars in their individual program, $1 billion from a conference perspective. There was a study done about 15, 20 years ago that they called the Red Line, and it showed a clear demarcation of programs that spent multi-million dollars above a certain level that played teams that had less than that, and those teams above won 75+% of the time. So just pure mathematically, it's a cost thing. If you spend more money at a significant level, you can increase your program. But where are you going to get that money from? The best part you can say is television money. So that's why that TV secondary rights television deal with HBCU Go can be extremely significant. It's going to take some time, though. That's not something that you dump the money in. Even if you got it all tomorrow, you're not going to see some change the next year. That's going to be a 4 or 5 year project to see the machinations of that moving forward. So that's another part of that. But I just wanted people to understand that. And just so people can understand that I'm not just putting it out there. The SEC this year got 8 teams. The Big 10 got 8 teams. The Big 12 got 7. The Big East had 5. The ACC with 5. The Pac-12 with 4. Right? And then it drops off. Even the West Coast Conference with Gonzaga and St. Mary's, they only got 2. The American only got 2. That was Houston and Memphis. Everybody else got 1 bid. So I think, again, I don't want to overstate that all those other conferences that you're talking about, they get 1 bid. This is set up for the power brokers that get all the money. They maintain the money and put a stranglehold on the money. They've improved their program so much that it just replicates itself because the programs with the money continue to have. So that's 71.9% of the teams of those 32 to be exact. I want to even take it to the next level. I don't think people, and then I'll let you follow with the question. If you go, 7 leagues received a combined 41 bids of the field of 68. So those 7 leagues received 41 bids. That's 68 or 60.3% of the bids. Even if you go to the NIT, because a lot of folks are talking about the NIT, 13 of the field of 32 of the NIT, 40.1% come from those 7 leagues. So even the NIT is in the business of just supporting the branded schools. So if you do that and you include the multiple bid leagues, everybody that is not 1 bid, it goes up to 9 league conferences. 16 of the 32 or 50% of the NIT was about those multiple bid leagues, which meant 61 teams or 61% of the 100 bids between the NCAA and NIT went to 9 conferences. The 32 conferences, it goes to 9 conferences. Less than a third receive all the bid because they have all the money and control everything involved with this piece of puzzle. So the magic bullet to this is the finances, but the problem is you can't get your hands on the finances because you don't have the television money and you ain't had it over the years.
Yeah.
So all this talk about just work harder, hire a better coach, what you saw with the basketball wins, they're called upset for a reason. They're called the magical dance for a reason. They're not supposed to happen. So you can't design them to happen. You couldn't play that game 100 times and ask it to have the same outcome. It's magical. That's why we watch it. It's not something that was purpose. And it's not to take anything away from those programs or anything away from those coaches, but I want people to understand mathematically, statistically, when you talk about Las Vegas that puts odds and bets on it, it's not supposed to happen.
And this is probably more of a Thursday conversation to get more into it, but I wanted to ask a question about, is there a demarcation line with regards to a scheduling model to where your Ken Palm rating gets a little bit higher at least as you get into January? I mean, is there a scheduling model where you're not only playing your HBCU teams that were strong in the tournament last year, whereas you take Texas Southern or Howard or Norfolk State, but some of those teams that were first four teams or teams like a St. Peter's or teams like a Fairleigh Dickinson to get them? Does that have any effect with regards to your rating being a little bit higher as you get toward?
Not really. There's mathematics you can do with it, but it's so intricate that I don't know if you can calculate it and really do a scheduling model of it because it changes so in a various fashion. There's what you call quadrants, and we can get in this maybe a little deeper on Thursday but there's quadrants, and there's 4 quadrants. The best quadrant is the first one, and then it goes all the way down. So the thing that you want to do is schedule quadrants, but the problem is the higher you go on the quadrant, the better it is, but you got to win those games.
Sure.
Well, guess who's in?
Yeah.
Those 9 conferences, or the majority of the teams in those 9 conferences I told you about. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the secondary thing that you could do is probably schedule quadrant 3, quadrant 2 wins. That's not going to change the number of bids you get. I want to make this clear. That's not going to change the number of bids you get. What that will change, though, is the seeding. So those 23 programs, the difference is based on that quadrant of wins determines oftentimes where they're seeded. Mm-hmm. So you can move from that 16 to a 14, 12 seed, which obviously determines the more likelihood of upset. There's a reason why you had that magical number, people about the 12-5. The reason is the Power 5 schools, because of the ranking system, get the 5, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're really better than the 12 seed.
Sure.
And that's why you tend to see more wins, is because it's the scheduling model allows them to be 5 when they really should be 12, and the team that's 12 should be 5. Sure. That's why you get the probable switch. Let's get into a last break. We'll come back, tease you out just a little bit of the D1 baseball, since we talked about the major division. We'll talk a little bit about that, tease a little bit about softball. But we'll get into some of the conference mix for the SWAC. We'll stick with us. We'll come right back on the other side and give you a breakdown of what took place in week number 1 for the SWAC baseball. Man, there was some surprises.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Let's get into it. We'll be right back on the other side and give you that information after this last one.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Kever's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KeversVoice.com. Kever's Voice, Kever's Voice, KeversVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
This is Brian Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Lab. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Lab, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
T. Madden & Associates is a sophisticated and experienced law firm located in your neighborhood. We're turning injury to cash.
T. Madden and Associates obtained almost $2 million for my injury. They turned my injury to cash.
Now, we can't guarantee how much your injury is worth, but we've recovered millions for our clients.
Call T. Madden & Associates at 833-PAID-123. That's 833-PAID-123.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. So I want to get into here. I'm going to start not with the SWAC because that's where we get into it. I do want to give these kind of updates in terms of the NEC. We had Maryland Eastern Shore actually finding a way to get 2 games this past weekend as they took 2 of 3 in their matchups. Those Friday matchups in terms of what took place there is a little interesting. But you had Norfolk State. They took it hard this past weekend, not doing as well in terms of those matchups. starting with Friday. You had Coppin State getting a game against Merrimack. They won 16-15 in terms of that matchup, so that was good to see in terms of what that looks like. Maryland Eastern Shore losing to Long Island 9-3 in terms of their matchup in the NEC. Delaware State losing to Central Connecticut, and then Norfolk State getting pounded by VMI in terms of what they got done on their Friday matchup. Not much difference on Saturday in terms of what took place there for those games. Coppin State also got a game against Merrimack, 8-0, shutting them out. Good to see that. But you had Maryland Eastern Shore bouncing back and getting the game against Long Island 5-4. VMI took down Norfolk State again, much closer game, 11-9. Similar to what you saw Delaware State as they lost a close one to Central Connecticut, 8-6. Coppin State did a double header on Saturday as they win the series, actually sweeping Merrimack as they defeat them 4-3. That was a 10-inning game. And then obviously you had some of those final matchups, if you would, on Sunday to close out with Maryland Eastern Shore getting the series victory 6-3 over Long Island. Not so much for Delaware State as they land 10-5 to Central Connecticut in terms of what took place there. And obviously VMI sweeping Norfolk State 15-4 in terms of those matchups. Similar when you go to the Colonials, you have your lone team out there. Any thoughts before I get to North Carolina A&T and the Colonial in terms of their 3 games as they lose 2 out of 3? I'll give you the scores shortly. Anything about the NEC? Obviously, you got to give some kudos as you get the sweep by Coppin State getting it done there.
Sweep by Coppin State. Coppin State was one of those programs that was one of those upper tier programs that was in the MEAC. But I was curious when you start taking a look at the NEC Colonial Conference in terms of the strength of the conference or what type of baseball are they playing over there in that conference, and just are they pitching heavy? Are they hitting heavy? So those are the things that kind of pop in my head when I take a look at these scores and take a look at these teams.
It'll be interesting to follow that over a couple of games to see where that lands. I would say as you get up in kind of that cold region, it doesn't warm up to a little later. So a lot of times you're thinking a little more pitching gets tougher to get those hits. As things warm up, you might get the bats come around. So even though it looks like they may be a pitching heavy, how much of that is due to the weather is something to look at as well. Colonial, you had North Carolina A&T facing up against Northeastern that has played some really good baseball in the Colonial over the last couple of years. They played 2-game set on their Friday, getting swept on their Friday series as they go down 14-0 in the first game and then 9-4 in the second matchup. They do bounce back on Saturday as they get one of the 3. It's always good to at least salvage a game and not get the totals swept for the series in terms of 0-3, as we'll see a couple of teams did get it done in the SWAC with that. But A&T bounces back on and wins 5-3 on Saturday with those contests. With that being said, what are your thoughts in terms of A&T? As they second year of playing outside of the MEAC, where they had a pretty strong program, decent program, obviously Bethune-Cookman. FAMU was really giving them problems and fits in there, but they would sneak up every so often and really run off a team. But trying to find their footing, it seems, in the Colonial.
Big thing. The big thing, trying to find that footing over there in that conference or whatnot. We've seen this North Carolina A&T baseball program, very good program when they were in the MEAC. But like you said, attempting to find their footing over there in the Colonial. And I think just early part of the season, Dr. Viola, we often question, especially along the East Coast, what warms up first, the pitching or the hitting. And, normally, like you mentioned, we see the hitting, the bats come along later on.
So let's get into the SWAC thing that we love here with some really good baseball. Not only do you have, obviously, HBCUs taking on, but you have the history and the matchups. So it gets intriguing. Obviously, over the last year, this is the second year of the new format of the SWAC in regards to expansion, 12 teams, 6 divisions, with 2 power programs coming in with Bethune-Cookman, FAMU. So the heightened level of baseball in the conference was really taken up. When you had your matchups, I told you about some of these top 10 matchups, which featured Jackson State and Alabama State, top 10 matchup according to Black College 9. You also had the Alabama State Bethune-Cookman matchup was a top 5 program. You had FAMU as a ranked team taking on an unranked Mississippi Valley. You had a ranked team in Texas Southern taking on an unranked team in Pine Bluff. You had a ranked Southern team taking on an unranked Grambling team. Be interesting how that may change up as we did our votes today. Black College 9, I got mine in. And you had a ranked Prairie View team taking on Alcorn. Let me get into your scores on Friday. You had Bethune-Cookman, to some, taking the upset, Alabama State, 6-5, as Alabama State was ranked higher than Bethune-Cookman coming in there. 3-4 matchup, if you would, in that particular, 2-3 matchup in particular contest there. Bethune-Cookman's at home. They went 6-5. FAMU shuts out Valley 8-0. Texas Southern 10-run over Bluff, 13-3 to be exact. You also had a second contest with 2 playing on Friday. Valley hosted FAMU. They lose that one 18-2 in that matchup. And then you have Jackson State defeating Alabama A&M 18-6. You have Southern over Grambling 8-7. Prairie View beating Alcorn State 10-4 in terms of matchups, as you saw going on there. What are your thoughts in terms of what came out Friday? You know, I was giving some scores and updates where things came up, surprise in some of these matchups. Ultimately, you get Alabama A&M taking 2 or 3 from Jackson, which came in as the number 1 team. A&M was 4. That was big in terms of what took place there. We're curious of what took place. Also, Bethune-Cookman at home took 2 or 3 from Alabama State.
Yeah.
That won the championship there, came in, was expected to do well, still can. Top of the East. Grambling taking out Southern, taking 2 out of 3. I'll go those scores particularly, but at least on Friday, and kind of what I'm talking about, these matchups. What did you see from baseball?
The big thing was Alabama A&M taking 2 or 3 from Jackson State. You're talking about Jackson State baseball team that was probably coming in one of the hottest teams in HBCU baseball. When you take a look, I think they had won 9 in a row going into that weekend series with Alabama A&M. And to be honest with you, pitching was a rumor this weekend. You take a look at the scores. Jackson State loses 13-9 on Friday. They win Saturday 18-6, but they take the L in the rubber game 12-9. So what jumped out at me was like just looking at these scores, like, whoa, what happened to the pitching this weekend? So obviously a lot of pitching was used up in terms of trying to keep these hot bats down over the weekend. But interesting that Alabama A&M, when you start talking about Florida A&M, talk about Alabama State, Bethune-Cookman, Jackson State in the East, Alabama A&M, they're making their pitch in this opening weekend series to say, hey, we're a program to deal with as well. And interesting enough, Valley goes over 3, but do you know they've already attempted 90 stolen bases this season, Dr. Cavil? I mean, that speed is going to catch somebody on a weekend series if they get on base. So they're flying around. And then taking a look at Grambling. Grambling taking 2 or 3 from Southern. That was significant. Cameron Buford, he was the SWAC player of the week because he had a huge weekend. Talk about midweek game over Wiley, and then over the weekend, he think for the 3 games, he hit 500 this past weekend. So pretty interesting weekend when you take a look at what was happening in the SWAC East and the SWAC West.
So after week number 1, in the Western Division, starting from the bottom to the top, you have Alcorn sitting at the bottom at 0-3, Southern at 1-2, along with Arkansas Pine Bluff. You have Grambling and Texas Southern sitting at 2-1. Grambling ultimately takes 2 or 3 at home from Southern. In terms of that, they got a
impressive
big wins there.
Yeah.
Walk-off wins, extra inning matchup. Prairie View does what they're supposed to do early, get right game. A lot of people came in there and get the 3 from Alcorn. I think that's going to be interesting, too, in terms of teams that are not playing well. are they able to sneak up and bite somebody that's going to be in the race in terms of those matches? As you said, Valley, can they run around the bases and do enough to take a game from somebody that will be maybe the difference in terms of a game or two at the end of the season? Same with Alcorn. Can they get somebody in the mix and bite somebody in the West? So going to the East, Valley sitting at 0-3, Alabama State at 1-2, Jackson State at 1-2, Alabama A&M at 2-1, Bethune-Cookman also at 2-1, and FAMU jumps off at 3-0. Interesting to see what this is going to look like week to week. We'll wait till Thursday and give you some more key matchups as they come this weekend, because I know you're chopping up the bits as you start looking at what is some schedule from games. It gets quickly with Texas Southern and Southern is one that you got to kind of out there on the West.
Texas Southern and Southern, and then Alabama State goes to Jackson next weekend as well. So that has already caught my
eye. Oh, boy. It will be fun in terms of what you look at the matchup. Any last thing that you want to say about baseball that you saw this past weekend that maybe kind of stuck out to you?
Oh, what stuck out, of course, is Alabama A&M. That was very impressive. Like I said, you're talking about Black College Lions' #1 team, and Alabama A&M went on the road, went to Jackson, and the bats came with them. And they took 2 of 3 from Jackson State. And like I said, you take a look at it, 13 runs Friday, then come back with 12 runs on Sunday. So they got some guys that can swing the bat.
Obviously, everybody's excited about the Southern pitcher that played in the World Baseball Classic, the no-hitter. Kudos to what he's going to do. Gives us a reason to kind of sneak in the fact that you have the championship game tonight featuring USA.
It's been so much fun.
Fans.
Yeah.
I know you've been texting back and forth just about how you've seen some of the Caribbean teams, particularly the connection of what you recall from the Negro Leagues. Also what you see in a lot of ways with Black college baseball over the years in terms of how connected it is. A lot of spirit, a lot of fun. Been a great tournament. Obviously, it's financially in that, but you can see culturally connected in some ways. It reminds you of the World Cup in soccer or what it does.
It's the way baseball is supposed to get played.
Like.
Yeah, with a lot of juice.
I
lot of juice. I love it. I love it.
I agree. Thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. For the lab listeners out there, appreciate all the love in terms of you joining us. Chuck Hunt, Ricky Burton, G. Boom Holly, getting in here, Jazzy Faye, Willie Alex Hines, Theron Waters, as you always do, Brother Wendell Davis, Jeff Roberts, Chad Cooper, Silas Edward McMorris, giving some love. Want to make sure we get the shout out to all those. Carol Keelam, Lennon Blow, always sharing us love. We appreciate you checking us out live. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports. With Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Mike Washington's out on assignment. We'll check with you on Thursday. As we will be on the road, we'll be giving you some updates, CSRI in Columbia, South Carolina. We'll take the show on the road, do our academic duties, taking doctoral students, including Charles, to see what we can do on a presentation. We'll take a sneak peek on the Celebration Bowl, as we call a decolonization lens, looking at that, as well as Jackson State this season with the prime effect. We'll get into seeing some data about what that looked like. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop every Tuesday and Thursday. Get back with us on Thursday at 6 o'clock Central Time. We're still planning to bring you a show. We look forward to next Thursday as we discuss the latest in the news. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. That's DrKenyattaCavil. Inside the HBCU Sports Lab 1 on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Dream big. Continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Charles?
Horse.
Roy?
Lecture.
Dismiss.